My name is Linda Harper, and at 52, I was finally living a life I had designed myself. I had shed a suffocating marriage, reclaimed my financial independence, and built a thriving graphic design business, Harper Creative, right here in Chicago's dynamic West Loop. My days were filled with purpose, my evenings with peace. I felt more alive, more relevant than I had in decades. The brain fog of menopause had lifted, replaced by a clarity that fueled my every move. There was just one lingering shadow on my otherwise brilliant horizon, my daughter, Emily. At 24, she was everything David and I had raised her to be: ambitious, fiercely independent, socially conscious. She worked at a cutting-edge tech startup downtown, immersed in a world of agile methodologies and disruptor innovation. I was incredibly proud of her. But in her bustling, modern life, I had become a relic, an antique, someone who wouldn't understand. She saw my reclaimed career not as a triumph, but as a quaint hobby. She dismissed my advice as old-fashioned and my perspective as out of touch. Every casual, condescending remark about my inability to grasp her modern life chipped away at the fragile confidence I had worked so hard to rebuild. I wanted to connect. I wanted to be a part of her world. But her polite dismissals built an invisible wall. Then came the networking event, a glitzy, high-tech affair that Emily proudly announced was for the cutting edge of Chicago's tech scene. The night, she brought her company's owner, a legendary figure in the industry, directly to me, not out of malice, but simply to observe how out of place I would be. She had no idea that her casually condescending attempt to showcase her old mother was about to spectacularly backfire. She thought she was displaying my irrelevance. She was about to learn that this old mother, this woman who wouldn't understand her modern life, was not just relevant. I was the key to her company's entire future. Before I tell you every meticulous, satisfying detail of how I turned my daughter's subtle dismissal into a powerful display of quiet competence, I want to invite you into this space. If you've ever had your experience trivialized because of your age, if you've ever felt that subtle sting of being deemed irrelevant by a younger generation, especially one you raised, then hit that subscribe button. This channel is a sanctuary for the unseen, a gathering place for women who are proving that age is just a number and wisdom is a timeless power. You'll want to see how this unfolds. Part 1. The divide of decades. My new life in Chicago was truly a masterpiece of my own design. It had been a year and a half since the dust settled for my divorce from David, and almost a year since I had taken Emily's gentle prompt about me being old and dramatic as my cue to sell my Gold Coast condo and move to the sunny coast of Florida. But after a few glorious months of sun, sand, and gardening, I realized that while my soul craved tranquility, my mind craved stimulation. I missed the vibrant, relentless pulse of Chicago, the city where my creative spirit had truly come alive. So I returned, not to a sprawling brownstone or a minimalist condo in a high-rise, but to a beautifully renovated loft in the West Loop, a neighborhood buzzing with creativity, tech startups, and my own graphic design studio, Harper Creative. My business was thriving, propelled by my renewed passion and a network of strong, supportive female clients who understood the quiet power of a woman's second act. I was 52, no longer battling hot flashes with such intensity, my brain fog a distant memory. My energy was boundless, my clarity absolute. I felt more vital, more connected to my own potential than I had been in decades. Yet, even in this wonderfully curated new existence, a subtle, almost imperceptible weight still clung to me. It wasn't David. He was a relic of the past, occasionally encountered in quiet coffee shop meetings, a man whose pride and career had dwindled without my invisible scaffolding. The weight was from my children, Mark and Emily. They were in their mid-20s now, intelligent, driven, and fully immersed in what they proudly called modern life. Mark, 25, continued his ascent in the consulting world in New York, a mini David in his ambition, but thankfully, far more capable of independent thought. Emily, 24, had found her calling at a cutting-edge tech startup here in Chicago, a company called Lumensphere. They developed revolutionary AI-driven software for sustainable urban planning, a field I genuinely found fascinating. She loved her job with an intensity one hadn't seen in her since her early college days. I was incredibly proud of both my children. I had sacrificed 2 decades of my career to raise them, pouring my creative and intellectual energy into nurturing their potential. They loved me, of course, in their own busy, self-absorbed way. They sent texts, made brief calls, and occasionally visited my new studio. But their affection often came with an underlying layer of subtle condescension, an unspoken narrative that I, their mother, was firmly rooted in a past they had gracefully outgrown. Emily, in particular, embodied this. She would talk about her work, her company's disruptive innovation, her agile methodologies, and her synergistic sprints with a zealous enthusiasm that often felt like a performance. I would listen, genuinely interested, and occasionally offer insights from my own years in market research and design strategy. I had worked with technology, with complex data, with large-scale projects. My mind was sharp, but my contributions were invariably met with a polite, dismissive smile. "Oh, Mom," she'd say, patting my arm gently, as if I were a slightly confused elder. "I know you mean well, but it's just different now. This is a whole new paradigm. It's too complex to explain. You probably wouldn't understand how the algorithms work. It's a very modern company." Or, in a variation, "Mom, you just wouldn't get it. You were doing traditional graphic design back then. This is the cutting edge. It's a very different world. Old-fashioned approaches just won't apply." My reclaimed career, the business I had built from the ground up, was often casually dismissed as a quaint hobby. "It's so sweet you're doing your art again, Mom," she'd say. Sweet. Not impressive. Not serious. Not groundbreaking. Just sweet. Each casual, condescending remark, each polite dismissal about my inability to grasp her modern life, chipped away at the fragile confidence I had worked so hard to rebuild since David's era of denigration. I wanted to connect. I wanted to be a part of her world, genuinely. But her unspoken narrative, the invisible wall she built around her modern life, made me feel like an antique, an irrelevant relic. I was supposed to be the wise, nurturing elder, not someone who could still engage in the intellectual rough and tumble of the 21st century. This subtle ageism, wrapped in a daughter's loving tone, stung more deeply than I let on. I was a vibrant, successful businesswoman. I was thriving. Yet, to my own child, I was still just Mom, the one who wouldn't understand. I yearned to shatter that perception, not for her approval, but for my own sense of complete self-actualization. My life was thriving, but her assumptions, subtle though they were, cast a tiny, persistent shadow. Part 2. The invitation and the subtle trap. The email from Emily arrived late one afternoon. The subject line was exuberant. UFTO come. Luminera Gala, Lumensphere's biggest night. The Luminera Gala was Lumensphere's annual showcase, a high-profile networking event held in a sprawling, modern art gallery in Fulton Market. It was, as Emily had often described, the most cutting-edge, tech-forward gathering of the year in Chicago. She had been working tirelessly on the visual presentations for it, boasting about the immersive AI projections she was designing for the main exhibition hall. "It's going to be huge, Mom," she'd said weeks ago, her eyes sparkling. "All the venture capitalists will be there. All the industry leaders. Even Anya Sharma herself will be speaking." Anya Sharma. The name had come up repeatedly in Emily's fervent conversations. Anya Sharma was the visionary founder and CEO of Lumensphere, a true tech titan, a woman barely in her early 40s who had taken her startup from a garage concept to a billion-dollar valuation in less than a decade. She was often featured in Forbes and Fast Company as a paradigm-shifting leader. Emily worshipped her. Anya represented everything modern and relevant in Emily's world. My own work at Harper Creative was often for companies that were decidedly not cutting edge, artisanal bakeries, local nonprofits, small family-run businesses. I loved these clients, but they clearly existed in a different universe from Lumensphere. Emily saw them as quaint, charming, but certainly not modern. I was initially thrilled by the invitation. An opportunity to support Emily, to see her in her element, to maybe even glimpse this elusive modern life firsthand. I accepted immediately, feeling a genuine excitement. I started looking for a dress, something elegant but not ostentatious, something that whispered, poised competence without screaming, desperate to be relevant. Emily's instructions for the night of the gala, however, were meticulous and subtly controlling. Mom, please don't wear anything too flashy. You know, Lumensphere is all about minimalist elegance. And please don't talk too much about graphic design. It's a tech crowd, so they really won't get it. And definitely don't offer to help anyone with their branding. Just observe. And listen. It's really important that you make a good impression. For me, the careful instructions, the quiet admonishments, hit me with a familiar sting. It was a mirror of David's old critiques, just wrapped in a daughter's polite concern. She wanted me there, but not fully there. Not as Linda Harper, successful creative. Just as Mom, the supportive, silently observant backdrop to her shining career. It felt like she was bringing an antique to a modern art show, wanting to display it, but worried it might break the aesthetic. My initial excitement curdled into a quiet dread. I wasn't just going to be an attendee. I was going to be an exhibit. On the night of the gala, a cool, crisp Chicago evening, perfect for strolling through the illuminated gallery streets, I dressed with precision. I chose a sleek, navy pantsuit with a simple silk blouse, professional, understated, utterly unflashy. It whispered competence. It certainly didn't scream graphic designer trying to fit in. My hair was pulled back in a neat bun. My makeup was subtle. I wanted to disappear into the elegant crowd, just as Emily clearly intended. Emily arrived at my condo in a sleek black dress, looking absolutely stunning. Her confidence radiated from her like a force field. She gave me a quick, appraising glance. "Okay, Mom," she said, her voice a little rushed. "You look nice."
Good.
"Remember, just try to take it all in. Don't worry about trying to talk about your work. Everyone here is talking about AI and blockchain. You probably wouldn't understand most of it anyway. Just nod and smile." She patted my arm. "I'm so glad you came. It means a lot to me that you're here, even if it's not really your scene." Not really my scene. The phrase echoed in my ears, sealing my fate. She wasn't just stating a fact. She was asserting my irrelevance. She was telling me, politely, that I didn't belong. The elegant pantsuit felt like a uniform for invisibility. As we rode the Uber downtown, Emily went over the key players, pointing out venture capitalists and other tech luminaries on LinkedIn. "That's Marcus Thorne," she said, showing me a photo of a man in his 50s with sharp eyes. "He owns Thorne Capital. Lumensphere is hoping to get another round of funding from him." The Fulton Market Gallery, bathed in dramatic blue and purple uplighting, hummed with a vibrant energy. The room was packed with brilliant, dynamic young people, a sea of sleek clothing and confident chatter. Screens displayed immersive digital art installations, abstract, flowing patterns of light and color. Emily, immediately in her element, introduced me to a few of her colleagues. Their smiles were polite, but their eyes held that same subtle, judging assessment. "Oh, you're Emily's mom? How nice." My contributions to the conversation about the future of urban planning tech were met with polite nods, then immediate redirection to conversations about seed funding and beta testing. I smiled. I nodded. I listened. I became the old observer she expected me to be. But underneath my composed facade, a quiet anger was building. A fire was beginning to flicker. I might be older, but I wasn't dull. My mind, sharp and observant, began to take in not just the tech speak, but the unspoken truths of the room. The subtle competitive glances. The forced joviality. The undercurrent of anxiety beneath the confident smiles. It was a different kind of world, yes, but human ambition and insecurity, it seemed, transcended age and technology. And Emily, in her desperate desire to be part of this modern elite, was missing the deeper signals. Signals I, as an old analyst, could still read with devastating clarity. The out-of-touch mother was watching.
And waiting.
Part 3. The observation and the glaring flaw. I spent the first hour of the Luminara Gala doing exactly what Emily had instructed, observing and listening. I drifted through the elegant crowd, a silent phantom in my sleek pantsuit. The room hummed with conversations about AI integration, sustainable energy grids, and blockchain applications for smart cities. My ear, trained from decades of market research, caught snippets of dialogue, not just about innovation, but about investment rounds, valuations, and the relentless pressure of scaling. It was David's world, repackaged for a younger generation, all about money and power, masked by a thin veneer of disruption. Emily, meanwhile, was flourishing. I watched her across the room, radiant and confident, chatting animatedly with colleagues and industry figures. She seemed to know everyone. Her laughter, clear and bright, echoed off the high ceilings of the gallery. I was proud of her. Fiercely, genuinely proud. But even that pride was tinged with the familiar ache of quiet dismissal. My daughter, the product of my years of unseen labor, believed I had nothing left to teach her. As I observed, I began to notice something else. Lumensphere's big, bold claims about their AI-driven solutions often relied heavily on visual communication. Large digital screens displayed intricate models of future cities, flowing data streams, and impressive infographics. And the visual design, I couldn't help but notice, was mediocre. It was slick, certainly, full of trendy animations and futuristic fonts. But it lacked soul. It lacked a cohesive narrative. It lacked impact. It looked like it had been created by brilliant engineers, not experienced visual storytellers. The brand message was fragmented. The data visualizations, while technically complex, failed to communicate true insight. The colors were trendy, but clashed subtly. It was the visual equivalent of a brilliantly written academic paper that hadn't been properly edited for public consumption. And a truly modern company, a disruptor, knew that effective communication, beyond the tech, was everything. This wasn't about understanding algorithms. This was about understanding human perception. And I understood that. I saw Emily presenting one of the main projections on a massive curved screen. Her voice was confident, her movements fluid. The technical aspects were undoubtedly brilliant. But as she pointed to a particularly complex infographic showing energy consumption patterns, I immediately picked up a subtle flaw. A color contrast issue that made one crucial data set almost invisible against the background. A minor error, perhaps, but one that undermined the clarity of the entire message. It was a missed opportunity to make a complex idea instantly understandable. It was a small visual hurdle in a presentation designed to convey monumental breakthroughs. It was the kind of mistake my own junior designers used to make before I patiently taught them to fix it. A tiny, knowing smile touched my lips. Old and dramatic, they called me. Perhaps. But my old-fashioned eyes could still spot a fundamental flaw in their cutting-edge visual presentation that no amount of AI could fix. My gaze then drifted to Emily's colleagues, her immediate team. They were young, eager, technically brilliant, and clearly overworked. I saw the faint shadows under their eyes, the nervous glances at their phones, the subtle signs of burnout. This agile methodology Emily often spoke of seemed to equate to constant, unsustainable sprints. They were building the future, but they looked utterly exhausted doing it. My out-of-touch maternal instincts, refined over decades of observing David's own high-pressure work life, immediately registered the strain. I drifted to the coffee station, watching a young woman from Emily's team, her face pale, downing a double espresso as she stared blankly at a digital display. Her posture screamed exhaustion. I offered her a polite smile. She nodded distractedly. It was during this quiet observation that I noticed a commotion near the main entrance. A small group had gathered, murmuring excitedly. Anya Sharma, the formidable CEO herself, had just arrived. She was smaller than I expected, with an intense, focused energy that commanded attention without a single dramatic gesture. She was dressed in a simple, elegant pantsuit, devoid of any flash, her dark hair pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense ponytail. She looked less like a tech titan and more like a brilliant academic, utterly absorbed in thought. She radiated quiet power. It was a type of power I understood and admired. Emily, I noticed, spotted Anya. Her face lit up with a mixture of awe and nervous excitement. She began to subtly angle herself, trying to position herself for an introduction. Anya was being surrounded by a flurry of VCs and board members, but Emily persisted. This was her idol. This was her moment to impress. A sudden, fierce surge of protectiveness, a truly old-fashioned maternal instinct, went through me. I didn't want Emily to embarrass herself. I didn't want her to appear desperate or performative in front of her hero. And I didn't want her to inadvertently reinforce the very flaw in Lumensphere's presentation that I had just identified. This was her stage, and I wanted her to shine. An idea, bold and dangerous, began to form in my mind. He told me I was out of touch. They thought I wouldn't understand. I was about to show them exactly how deeply I understood the modern world. Not through jargon, not through algorithms, but through the timeless power of clear, compelling visual communication. And the fundamental, unchanging truth about human connection. The old mother was about to perform a silent miracle. For her daughter. And for myself. Part 4. The strategic intercept. I watched as Emily finally maneuvered herself close enough to Anya Sharma to exchange a few excited words. Anya, ever gracious, smiled and nodded, her attention clearly elsewhere, scanning the room, engaging with high-level investors. This was a classic networking play by Emily, positioning herself in the CEO's orbit, hoping to be noticed. My stomach churned. I knew David's version of this play. It often involved sacrificing someone else's comfort for his own perceived advantage. I had been that sacrifice too many times. I didn't want Emily to learn that lesson. I didn't want her to become David. Anya Sharma suddenly turned towards the giant, curved screen displaying Emily's impressive, yet flawed, infographic. Her eyes, sharp and analytical, narrowed slightly. I saw her hand come up, a subtle gesture, pointing to the same section I had identified, the one with the poor color contrast. She frowned, a tiny, almost imperceptible sign of disgruntlement. It was clear that, even to her brilliant, technical mind, the visual clarity was lacking. This was my moment. This was my strategic opening. And I was not about to miss it. My blood hummed with a quiet, exhilarating purpose. I began to move. Not directly towards Anya and Emily, which would have been gauche and attention-seeking, but tangentially. I moved towards the side of the gallery, observing another digital installation, making it look as though I was simply appreciating the art. But my path was carefully calculated, my trajectory aiming for a subtle intercept. I moved with the precise, deliberate grace of a seasoned hunter. My menopause fog was a myth. My clarity was absolute. As I neared Emily and Anya, I heard a fragment of their conversation. It's designed to illustrate the urban heat island effect, Miss Sharma, Emily was explaining, her voice a little breathless with nerves. The red overlays represent areas of severe temperature increase due to lack of green space. We're showing a predictive model, here based on. Anya nodded, but her frown deepened as she looked at the screen. I see the overlay, Emily, she said, her voice quiet but pointed. But the underlying thermal data, the actual baseline temperatures, they're almost invisible against the city map. What's the insight here? It looks almost murky. Emily blanched.
Oh, yes.
That's the baseline data. It's a very complex set. Our designers decided on a lower opacity for a cleaner look. Her voice trailed off, flustered. She was caught, exposed. Her cutting-edge design had a fundamental flaw that the CEO had instantly spotted. My heart went out to her. This wasn't David. This was my daughter, vulnerable and exposed in a way I knew well. Clean isn't always clear, Emily, Anya said, her tone firm but not unkind. She shifted her gaze, scanning the room, perhaps looking for someone to clarify the presentation, a visual expert to chime in. And that's when our eyes met. Anya Sharma, the formidable tech titan. Her eyes widened fractionally in recognition. A flash of surprise, then something warm. And then a smile. A genuine, unguarded smile that lit up her entire face. She walked directly toward me, bypassing a startled Emily. "Linda," she exclaimed, her voice clear and carrying across the hushed murmur of the crowd. "Linda Harper. I thought that was you. Goodness, what a delightful surprise." She reached out and clasped my hand, her grip firm and warm. I remember our conversation so vividly from the Children's Hospital Gala. Your insights on market analysis were incredibly sharp. What a treat to see you here. Emily, standing frozen beside the giant screen, looked utterly bewildered. Her mouth hung slightly open. Her incredibly important tech titan boss knew her old-fashioned mother and remembered her from a charity gala and actually admired her insights? "Anya," I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face, feeling the true power of being seen. "It's wonderful to see you too. You look wonderful." Emily here was just showing me her excellent work on this urban heat map. I gestured gracefully toward the screen, allowing my gaze to sweep over the problematic visual. Anya's smile dimmed slightly as she turned back to the screen. "Yes, Emily's done fantastic work on the underlying data, of course. But honestly, the visual rendering is leaving a bit to be desired. It lacks immediate impact. The core message is lost in the presentation." She looked at me, a searching question in her eyes. "You have an eye for design, don't you, Linda? You were a graphic designer, if I recall?" I confirmed, and I am again. "Harper Creative." "Oh, marvelous. That's wonderful news." She turned back to the screen. "See, what I need here is for this to resonate not just with engineers, but with city planners, with politicians, with taxpayers. The average person needs to see this and instantly grasp the critical need for change. And right now," she paused, then spoke quietly, almost to herself, "it looks a bit like abstract art, which is lovely, but not particularly persuasive when you're trying to secure a multi-million-dollar grant." Emily was still staring, wide-eyed, completely silent. David's voice, echoing in my head, dismissed. "You wouldn't understand this modern life, Mom. It's too complex." Oh, but I did. I understood it perfectly. I understood the universal language of clear, compelling communication. "It's a common challenge with complex data visualizations," I said, my voice calm and authoritative, the voice of a professional who knew her craft. "Often, the desire for sleekness can compromise clarity. Sometimes, a slightly less trendy color palette, one with stronger contrast, can instantly highlight the critical insights. And the underlying data can be revealed in layers, as the presenter speaks, rather than obscured all at once. It's about leading the eye, not overwhelming it." Anya's head snapped around. Her eyes, those incredibly sharp eyes, lit up with recognition. "Layers. Yes, that's it exactly. We've been trying to figure out how to make these static presentations more dynamic. We have all the animation capabilities, but the storytelling itself is what's missing. The visual narrative." "That's a brilliant insight, Linda." She looked from me to Emily, then back to me, her mind clearly racing. "Linda, I have to ask, would you ever be open to a consultation with my lead design team? Perhaps a few hours just to give them some guidance on visual storytelling? Your perspective would be invaluable. And perhaps something more long-term if this works out." Emily made a small, choked sound beside me, a sound of utter astonishment. Her all-powerful CEO, the woman she worshipped as the epitome of modern life, was not only seeking advice from her out-of-touch mother but actively pursuing a partnership. And on her biggest project, the table had just turned. And my quiet competence had, in that precise moment, utterly disarmed David's ghost, my daughter's casual dismissal, and Emily's entire carefully constructed hierarchy of relevance. Part 5. The humiliation of realization. The Luminara Gala, a glittering beacon of modern tech and subtle condescension just moments before, became, for Emily, a sudden crucible of humbling realization. She stood absolutely still, her perfect posture stiff with shock, her meticulously practiced smile replaced by an utterly bewildered expression. Her incredibly important CEO, Anya Sharma, was standing directly in front of her, lavishing praise and offering a consultation to her old-fashioned mother, the woman Emily had politely instructed to just nod and smile because she wouldn't understand the cutting edge of tech. The air, which had hummed with her triumphant relevance just moments ago, now crackled with the undeniable presence of my own, quietly asserted, competence. "Emily," Anya said, her voice now filled with a vibrant energy I hadn't heard before, "this is exactly the kind of outside-the-box thinking we need. Your mother just gave me a key insight for the entire visual strategy of our next fundraising deck. Layers.
Visual storytelling.
We need this, and we need it yesterday." She turned back to me, her enthusiasm radiating. "Linda, please tell me your rates. We'll set up a meeting for next week, no matter what." Emily managed to stammer, but Miss Sharma, Mom's a graphic designer. "For local businesses. She does logos." Her tone was tight, almost defensive, clearly trying to redirect Anya's focus, to subtly diminish my experience. Her face was flushed, not with pride, but with deep embarrassment. This was her idol, her modern god, acknowledging that her quaint mother understood visual communication on a level her cutting-edge team did not. Anya turned to Emily, her expression suddenly sharp, her gaze unwavering. "Emily," she said, her voice dropping, "effective visual communication is the universal language of innovation. It doesn't matter what you're designing for. A small business logo or a multi-million-dollar pitch. The principles are the same: clarity, impact, storytelling. Your mother just identified a fundamental flaw in our approach that none of our brilliant, agile, young team could see. That's not just logos. That's genius. And that's exactly what Lumensphere needs." Emily's face went white. She wanted to disappear. The condescension she had effortlessly projected onto me for years was now being reflected back at her, amplified by the authority of her CEO. Anya hadn't just endorsed me. She had gently but firmly dismantled Emily's entire perception of my relevance, piece by piece, right in front of her. My daughter, the product of 2 decades of my unseen, unrecognized intellectual labor, was finally seeing the architect. And she was seeing her in a way she hadn't expected, as a peer, as a resource, as someone truly modern. Anya and I quickly exchanged business cards. She wrote her direct cell number on hers. "Call me first thing Monday morning, Linda. Let's make this happen." She gave me a firm handshake, a nod that was almost a salute, and then seamlessly glided back into the main crowd, leaving Emily and me standing by the giant, now subtly mocking, heat map display. The air around us seemed to crackle with an unspoken tension. Emily didn't say a word. Her mouth was set in a tight, thin line. Her eyes, usually so vibrant, were now dull with shock and a dawning, terrible shame. All her casual assumptions, her quiet dismissals, had just been publicly pulverized. She had presented me as a backdrop, and I had effortlessly stolen the spotlight. I could feel the subtle shift in the attention of her colleagues who had witnessed the exchange. Their polite smiles were gone. They looked at me with a newfound, respectful curiosity. This was Emily's mother, the old graphic designer, the one Anya Sharma, their brilliant CEO, had just endorsed as genius. The information was being processed. The hierarchy was being reevaluated. "Mom," Emily finally whispered, her voice barely audible, thick with humiliation. What was that?" "That, darling," I said, my voice gentle but firm, "was an example of what modern life truly means. It means adaptability. It means wisdom that transcends jargon. And it means recognizing true talent, no matter what age it happens to be." I paused, looking at her, allowing the words to sink in. "Perhaps you would understand it better now." She flinched, the words echoing her own condescending remarks back to her. She looked from me to the business card in my hand, then back to my face. The realization was stark. Her old-fashioned mother had just landed the biggest client of her new business. Her out-of-touch mother was about to consult for her idol, the legendary Anya Sharma. And her irrelevant mother had done it without a single flashy presentation, without a single boast, simply by observing, listening, and offering quiet, precise expertise. This wasn't a punishment. This wasn't even revenge in the way I'd sought it with David. This was simply the unavoidable truth, finally brought to light. It was the natural consequence of her subtle ageism, and the silent brilliance of my own second act. Part 6, the collaborative re-education. The days following the Luminara Gala were filled with an intoxicating blend of anticipation and subtle, uncomfortable shifts in my relationship with Emily. On Monday morning, Anya Sharma's assistant called exactly at 9 a.m. A meeting was set for Wednesday afternoon at Lumensphere's sleek, futuristic offices in the Merchandise Mart. I accepted, feeling a thrill of excitement I hadn't felt since landing my first major corporate client back in my 20s. This was the big leagues. Emily, meanwhile, was walking on eggshells. She would call me, not with her usual self-absorbed chatter, but with tentative questions about the meeting. "Mom, what are you going to talk about with Anya? Are you really going to tell them what you think about their branding?" Her voice was laced with a curious mix of trepidation and reluctant admiration. "I'm going to tell them the truth, Emily," I'd say, my voice calm. "And I'm going to tell them how they can make their message clearer. That's what I do." The meeting with Anya and her lead design team was everything I had hoped for. The Lumensphere design team consisted of 5 bright, enthusiastic young professionals, all in their late 20s and early 30s, brimming with technical skill but, as I'd suspected, lacking the nuanced strategic thinking that came from decades of real-world experience in visual communication. They talked a lot about disruptive visuals and next-gen aesthetics. I listened patiently. Anya introduced me with a glowing endorsement. "Team," she'd said, "this is Linda Harper. She's consulting with us on our visual communication strategy." She spotted a critical blind spot in our gala presentations, a blind spot that I, frankly, miss myself. "Linda, the floor is yours." I didn't talk about agile methodologies or blockchain. I talked about human perception. I talked about the psychology of color, the neuroscience of visual hierarchy, the timeless principles of storytelling through imagery. I talked about clarity over cleverness, about resonance over flash. I broke down their existing gala presentation, showing them where their beautiful graphics actually confuse the message. I showed them how a minor shift in a color palette, a subtle change in font weight, or a strategic layering of data could turn a complex problem into an instantly understandable narrative. They were captivated. The young designers, initially a bit defensive, soon became engaged, leaning forward, taking furious notes. They asked insightful questions, hungry for real-world application of their theoretical knowledge. I watched their minds open, watched them make the connections between my old-fashioned principles and their modern tech. I wasn't dictating, I was collaborating. I was mentoring. I was teaching. Over the next 2 months, I became an unofficial strategic consultant for Lumensphere's visual communications. I developed new guidelines for their presentations, their website, their marketing materials. I worked closely with Emily's team, subtly guiding them, challenging them, helping them elevate their technical brilliance with true creative impact. Emily herself was initially cautious. She sat in our early meetings, a quiet observer. But as she watched me work, as she saw the respect I commanded from Anya, as she witnessed the tangible improvements in her own team's output, her defensiveness slowly melted away. She saw me not as a quaint, out-of-touch mother, but as a genuine expert, as a valuable resource, as a creative force. One afternoon, we were reviewing a particularly complex data visualization for an upcoming investor pitch. It was a dense web of interconnected smart city sensors and data flows. I pointed out a small adjustment in the iconography that would immediately clarify the hierarchical relationships between different data points. Emily stared at it for a long moment. Then her eyes lit up.
"Oh, Mom."
"Yes, that's brilliant. Why didn't we see that?" "Sometimes," I said gently, a small smile playing on my lips, "you need an old-fashioned eye to see things that a young eye takes for granted. We see different things." She nodded, then hesitated. "Mom, I'm sorry." Her voice was quiet, earnest. "I'm so sorry for everything I said. About you not understanding. About you being old-fashioned. You're not." She paused again. "You're actually really cool. And you understand this more than anyone I know." Tears pricked my eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of profound relief and gratitude. My daughter. My beloved Emily.
She saw me.
Not just Mom, but Linda Harper, the strategic creative. "Thank you, Emily," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "That means the world to me." My work with Lumensphere grew into a formal, highly lucrative contract and a prominent badge of honor for Harper Creative. My relationship with Emily blossomed. We didn't just talk about tech now.
We talked about life.
About fears. About aspirations. Our weekly calls transformed from perfunctory updates to genuine, deeply connected conversations. She asked for my advice on office politics, on leadership, on finding balance in a demanding career. She trusted my judgment.
She trusted me.
Part 7. The unveiling of her own value. The story of Linda Harper, the old mother who subtly became a crucial consultant to Lumensphere, began to ripple through Chicago's tech and design communities. Not through any self-promotion from me. My preference for quiet competence remained, but through the quiet admiration of Anya Sharma and Emily. Anya, always direct and effusive in her praise when it was earned, often mentioned my contributions in her own industry talks and interviews. "We're relying heavily on the brilliant strategic insights of Harper Creative," she'd say, and sometimes, "Linda Harper has fundamentally changed the way we think about visual communication." Emily, once cautious, became my fiercest advocate, glowing with genuine pride as she spoke of my work. My profile in the Chicago business world, already growing due to the success of Harper Creative, soared. Invitations to speak at industry conferences, requests for interviews from tech publications. Suddenly, I was visible in a way David had always craved for himself. My age, which had once felt like a barrier, became an asset. I was seen as a seasoned veteran, a calming, wise presence in a chaotic, fast-paced industry. The old mother, it turned out, possessed a depth of perspective and a strategic clarity that no young, digital native could replicate. My journey of navigating menopause, far from dulling my mind, had, in fact, sharpened it. The hot flashes had burned away my tolerance for superficiality, my willingness to comply with limiting expectations. The brain fog had, in retrospect, been the quiet period of gestation before my next brilliant idea. Mark, my son, observed this transformation with his usual pragmatic interest. He saw my growing influence, my expanding network, my undeniable success. He saw my genuine happiness. He never apologized directly for his old and dramatic comment, but his actions spoke volumes. He started introducing me to his own professional contacts as my incredibly smart mother, Linda Harper, who's changing the game in design strategy. His occasional visits to Chicago no longer involved vague plans for inheriting the condo. They involved requests to sit in on my client meetings or to brainstorm marketing campaigns for his own tech startup ideas. He saw me as a resource, yes, but now as a respected, admired resource. My relationship with David remained distant. He had lost his career trajectory at Sterling Hayes after the disastrous presentation that second chapter focused on. His social capital dwindled without my unspoken strategic support. He lived his carefully curated life in a smaller downtown condo, still clinging to the remnants of his image. I saw him once at a mutual friend's holiday party. He saw me from across the room, talking animatedly with Anya Sharma and a group of Lumensphere executives. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I could see the dawning realization in his eyes. The quiet, unassuming woman he had subtly denigrated for decades was now not just thriving, she was soaring. And she was doing it without him. He had always measured worth in terms of external accolades, titles, salaries, public recognition. He had judged my appearance, my intelligence, my relevance against superficial standards, dismissing me as old and dramatic, convinced I wouldn't understand his modern world. But my modern world was one he could no longer access. It was built on authentic connection, on quiet competence, on the deep satisfaction of work that genuinely impacted others. And that was a currency he simply didn't possess. The subtle dismissals, the quiet put-downs, the assumption that my old mind couldn't grasp their modern life, they had served their purpose. They were the very words that, in their casual cruelty, forced me to reclaim my voice. They made me understand that my own quiet wisdom, forged in decades of observation and experience, was a timeless power that needed no validation from anyone else. My own modern life wasn't about keeping up with algorithms. It was about leading with clarity, purpose, and the undeniable wisdom that comes with true, lived experience. My strength had not diminished with age. It had simply unfurled. Part 8. The serenity of unapologetic authenticity. As my 53rd birthday approached, I reflected on the incredible journey I had embarked upon just over a year ago. My life in the West Loop loft, my thriving business, my renewed relationships with my children, and my unexpected visibility in Chicago's tech scene, all of it felt like a dream. But it was a dream I had meticulously, fiercely brought into being. The contrast between the Linda I was and the woman I had been was stark. I no longer woke up with the low hum of anxiety or the crushing weight of other people's expectations. My days were truly mine, dictated by my own creative rhythms and the demands of my fulfilling work. My body, which had once felt like a battlefield, was now simply my own. I continued my gentle yoga practice, took long, invigorating walks along the Chicago River, and savored simple, nourishing meals. I allowed myself to simply be, without apology or explanation. The old and dramatic label, once a searing indictment, now felt utterly laughable. I wasn't dramatic. I was deeply felt. I wasn't old. I was experienced. My capacity for emotion, for empathy, for profound observation, these weren't weaknesses. They were the very wellsprings of my creativity and my quiet power. And Emily, my vibrant, modern daughter, was now learning that truth from me, not just from tech conferences. Emily and I continued to grow closer. She often came to my studio now, not for strategic advice, but simply to talk, to share. She confided in me about the pressures of her job, the relentless pace of innovation, the unspoken competition among her peers. She started to see that her modern life wasn't all glamorous breakthroughs. She learned that quiet wisdom, born of years of lived experience, was more valuable than any algorithm. She even started asking me for book recommendations, preferring my classic novels to the self-help bestsellers she used to devour. "Mom," she said to me one afternoon, as we sat having tea in my sunlit studio, surrounded by my design mock-ups, "I used to think that being modern meant always looking forward, always adapting to the newest thing. But watching you, you adapted. Yes, but you also brought back something truly valuable from the past. Your principles. Your timelessness. That's actually the most modern thing of all." A profound peace settled over me. This was the acknowledgement I had unconsciously yearned for. Not from David, not from the world, but from my own child. The divide of decades had finally bridged. The unspoken dismissal had been replaced by genuine, deeply felt respect. My quiet power, born of enduring the ignominy of being called useless and dramatic, had truly come into its own. My interactions with David remained polite but distant. His world, without my invisible support, seemed to have shrunk. His social engagements were fewer, his complaints more frequent. He existed in a diminished reality of his own making, a stark contrast to my flourishing new life. I sometimes wondered if he ever truly understood what he had lost. The depth of my mind, the unwavering loyalty of my heart, the immense creative and strategic power I had wielded on his behalf for decades. Perhaps he never would. And that was fine. His comprehension was no longer a prerequisite for my peace. I had proven, not to him, not to them, but to myself, that my age was not a limitation. My life changes, my experiences, even my menopause, had not made me irrelevant. They had simply sharpened my vision, ignited my courage, and honed my quiet power into an unstoppable force. I was not old and dramatic. I was unapologetically, authentically, brilliantly me. Part 10. The timeless power of being seen. I stood in my bustling studio in the West Loop, the afternoon sun streaming through the huge windows, illuminating my vibrant design boards. The city hummed below, a symphony of purpose and potential. I was in my element, collaborating with my team on a new branding project for a cutting-edge Chicago tech firm. And my work, now infused with the quiet wisdom of my journey, felt more meaningful than ever before. It had been Emily's assumption, her polite dismissal, that I wouldn't understand her modern life. But her company's owner, Anya Sharma, had understood. She had understood the timeless value of clarity, of visual storytelling, of genuine strategic insight. And in calling me by my first name, in truly seeing and acknowledging my competence, she had unwittingly shattered the invisible wall my daughter had built between us. She had validated the very intelligence David had called useless. The truth, I realized, was not about understanding modern life through jargon and algorithms. It was about understanding life itself, about understanding people, their needs, their aspirations, their anxieties. And that understanding, that empathy, that wisdom, those were not products of age or youth, but of lived experience. My experience. I thought about the trajectory of my life, the dutiful wife, the unseen partner, the invisible CEO of a household. And then, the radical acts of self-reclamation, selling David's wine, changing the locks, confronting his financial deceptions, selling the family home. Each act, driven by the intense, clarifying fire of menopause and profound disrespect, had propelled me forward, stripping away layer after layer of what I was not, revealing the vibrant, powerful woman beneath. The women of this channel understand. We know that the silent changes of life, especially after 50, are not about decline. They are about revelation. They are about finding the authentic self that has been waiting, patiently, for permission to unfurl. Linda turns to address the camera directly. She is in her stylish, bustling design studio. Her laptop is open to a complex but beautiful digital design. She radiates professional confidence and a deep, calm inner peace. Have you ever loved someone so deeply, a child, a spouse, a friend, that you allowed their subtle dismissals to define your worth? Have you ever had your experience or your knowledge minimized, dismissed as old-fashioned, or out of touch by a younger generation? And what was the moment, that quiet, searing realization, when you knew you simply couldn't tolerate it anymore? Tell me your story in the comments below. Let's talk about the silent battles we fight, the casual disrespect we endure, and the powerful, unwavering strength we find when we finally decide to redefine our own relevance. Your story is a testament to the timeless power of being seen and being truly, fully, authentically you. And if you're ready to prove that true wisdom transcends age, if you're ready to show the world that your old-fashioned brilliance is exactly what the modern world needs, then make sure you subscribe to The Silent Change After 50. We are building a community where women over 50 are claiming their power, inspiring each other, and proving that the best is truly yet to come. Join us.